Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Friday Forum. My name is Elvin Buku, and I serve as the Deputy Director for the Foundation for the Tacoma Students. Foundation's mission is to build and strengthen the Graduate Tacoma community-wide movement of over 350 community partners to help every child achieve success from cradle to college and career. As part of our organization's response to COVID, Friday Forums were launched a while ago to provide relevant and locally focused information and resources to our community partners and families. Over the past several weeks, we've covered a number of topics, including the state of Tacoma public schools, teaching and mentoring from a distance, and how COVID-19 has impacted kind of the childcare industry, funding communities in Pierce County, so on and so forth. But the topic and theme of the day today is addressing mental health, moving into this incredibly unprecedented summer of programming. The topic is definitely top of mind for many of our partners, as the pandemic has brought loss of stability, loss of security, and safety for many of the youth and families we serve. I also want to take a moment to call out the importance of addressing mental health given the state of our society today. As we speak, racial injustice, structural racism, prejudice are right in our face. It's alive and well in places like Minneapolis and others. Pandemic or not, these injustices are daily occurrences, as we've seen with the recent killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and countless others before them. These experiences are definitely not new, especially for our Black brothers and sisters, and have been occurring for generations. This is also the case not only for those youth, but for the community members, partners, families, parents, and our colleagues that serve them. So how do we support during this time the mental health needs of our youth and families best? How do we support those that support them? Those are some of the questions that we'll try to address today. And while we don't have any of our Black brothers and sisters on this call, everybody on this call and within our organizations seek to be the best allies as possible in that fight, especially regarding mental health supports. So today, I have the pleasure of serving as moderator for a panel of 3 individuals who bring a unique perspective to the state of mental health for Tacoma families and youth. I will introduce them now, and I ask that they wave to the camera so everybody knows who I'm calling out. So first, we have Kathy Hagan, the Executive Director of Integrated Services for Comprehensive Life Resources. Kathy, thank you for being here. Next, we have Beth Stone, Clinical Program Manager for Comprehensive Life Resources as well. Thank you, Beth, for being here. And last but not least, we have Matthew Wilson, the newly assigned Executive Director for Oasis Youth Center. Panelists, thank you all for being here. And at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Matthew to get us started.
Hi, my name is Matthew Wilson, and just starting in April, I'm the new Executive Director at Oasis Youth Center. I use he, him, his pronouns. And for those of you that don't know a lot about Oasis, we are celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. We were founded in 1985, and our mission is to help queer and questioning youth learn, connect, and thrive. And our goal is to have queer youth valued as the strong creative leaders that they are. We made a pretty big shift to online programming during this pandemic, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. In addition, I want to tell you about some of the services that we offer. So we're located in downtown Tacoma, and of course all of our in-person locations are closed. We also have 2 satellite locations, one in the Key Peninsula area, which is at their Civic Center, and then a second one that opened in the fall in Lakewood at St. Mary's Episcopal Church. In a normal year where there's not a pandemic, we serve about 900 youth, and at the core of what we do, we're a leadership program, and in addition to that, we also provide social services like mental health. And what we've done is taken our programming and expanded it online so that our youth have a way to connect with each other. When we first started, we thought, okay, we'll just take all of our programming and just move it online. We'll keep the workshops and try to just move forward as normal. And what we found out quickly is that's not going to work. Our youth told us what they need is just a place to connect with other youth. They needed the support that they weren't getting at home, the support that they're not getting at school, and a lot of them didn't have access. So we moved quickly to apply for some funds to distribute tablets so youth could access our online programming. And what we've also noticed is an increased demand for mental health therapy. So we have a voucher program so that if youth would like to access therapy and they don't have insurance, they can't afford a copay, or are having trouble explaining to their parents why they need to access it, they can come to us. We provide the voucher, and we have a list of therapists who are either queer themselves or have worked with queer youth extensively in their career. And it's very clear why that's needed. One is that the environment at home is where parents are not accepting, and they are feeling isolated and feeling the rejection even stronger, where going to school or going to Oasis gave them a reprieve from that, and they're just not finding that. So they have the opportunity to talk with someone, and of course we're using all HIPAA compliant means for them to communicate with their therapist. Yeah, so I think that's kind of a quick overview of what we're doing at Oasis.
That's great, Matthew. Thank you for sharing that overview. We will have a little bit of time at the end of the webinar to do some Q&A, and we have some pre-loaded questions, but we also want to, for all of our participants, if you feel so compelled, please feel free to put a question, and we will try to address that towards the end of the webinar here today. So Matthew, we'll hear from you a little bit in the end when we go through questions and answers, but thank you again for sharing that. At this point, I'd like to pass it off to Kathy with Comprehensive Life Resources to kind of go through a similar overview of mental health supports.
Now I'm here. Thanks, and thank you to Graduate Tacoma for reaching out to have us here today. I appreciate the opportunity. A little bit about Comprehensive Life Resources. Most of you listening are probably familiar with us, but we're a private nonprofit behavioral health agency. We serve Pierce County. We provide a pretty broad spectrum of care for all the way from youth to adults. In addition to outpatient counseling services, we also provide substance use treatment. We have a residential treatment program, and we also have treatment foster care programs. We do operate the only youth shelter in Pierce County, which through this pandemic has been double its capacity, which is really just terrible. In children's services, we provide most of our outpatient counseling services in the schools. We serve 4 school districts. In addition to Tacoma, we serve Gig Harbor, Key Peninsula, Puyallup, and Orting. We just found that it was much better for us to connect with youth in their school environments where they're there every day and they feel safe. The sudden closing of the schools due to COVID really disrupted our youth and family business in really challenging ways, and I know it's been very hard on our staff teams. One of the things we've been asked is to really comment on the changing landscape for mental health given the current pandemic. And this is certainly something we keep our eye on really closely. It's a hard thing to predict. None of us have this in our frame of reference. Most people have not been through a pandemic. One of the things we've been looking at Comprehensive is the Department of Health's forecasting for behavioral health providers. They really base their analysis on disaster relief efforts. So when folks go through extreme stress, what tends to happen and through what time frame. Their predictions are that as many as 2 to 3 million Washingtonians will experience behavioral health symptoms in the next 3 to 6 months. This will include primarily depression, anxiety, and acute stress, which isn't surprising. You can expect a peak in depression and suicide rates between October and December. Given the current rate of unemployment and unemployment's relation to suicide as a risk factor, we can expect a significant increase in suicidality, if not attempts. And that is pretty concerning. And about half of the folks that have behavioral health crisis also struggle with substance use. It's interesting, in our substance use program, about 30 days after COVID hit and prompted a stay in a place order, we lost about half of our capacity. Clients fell out of service. We're really concerned about that. Where are they at and what's happening? In behavioral health, our shift has focused, much like Matthew related, we very rapidly had to shift to a telehealth model. Our outpatient clinics closed, the schools closed, and really within 2 weeks, we had to steer our ship into telehealth. It was quite challenging. To this, even right now, we're open, but very limited basis. And we're struggling because we're not sure that telehealth is as effective as seeing somebody face to face. And how do we meet everybody's needs? Because we know that there certainly isn't equal access to technology, and not all of our clients have the ability to do telehealth. And so how do we meet their needs? We also, I think our shift in therapy is focused. So in addition, we're not just getting on telehealth and talking about trauma anymore. We're talking about, do you have food? Do you need help getting connected with resources? We're screening for suicide. We're screening for depression, and environmental safety. I know the calls to the domestic violence hotline have increased significantly. The youth and families where schools have eyes on and counselors have eyes on, we're not. So we have high-risk families where nobody's watching with a lot of increased stress, and I think we have a lot of concern about that. And then, I don't know, Beth, if you want to speak more specifically to youth and how this has impacted youth.
Definitely. So like we can expect, this has caused an obvious huge disruption in our youth's daily life. Like Kathy talked about, their daily routine was going to school. School often was the place where they got their daily needs met. So feeling safe, getting fed, that social need, so many pieces. So to have that disruption happen and so quickly was a big hit to the youth's mental health and their level of stability. It also increased isolation. So they're used to being with their friends, they're with teachers, maybe they're in sports and clubs, to being at home. And, as Kathy mentioned, again, not all of the homes that these youth come from are places of acceptance or safety. So we're seeing with those increase in depression and anxiety, feelings of loneliness. Our high school seniors are a population within that ourselves where we're seeing them really struggle. This is a big year for them. So whether it was they missed their spring season of sports, or they missed graduation and they missed prom, things that are a really big deal to them. Some of our seniors that we serve in schools, they're the first generation that's ever graduated, that was ever going to walk across the stage. So that was a hard loss to them. And so they're struggling. And, and then there's a flip side. There's a little bit of a positive piece to that, in that with students at home, one of the biggest barriers we have working in the children and youth field is getting parental engagement. So with kids being at home more, we're able to kind of loop them into services a little bit more. So that was a nice benefit, I guess, so to speak, in this pandemic that we're living in, but we're able to bring them to the floor a little bit more and work with them. And the shift to telehealth was easier with our youth, because they're savvy. They're savvy with technology. They're comfortable with it. And so for them to be able to just flip on their phone and look at it and engage in their session was actually helpful in our engagement rates with some of our youth. So that was an increase in service that we were able to see in some of this.
And so Beth,
Yeah.
sorry, one of the things we get asked a lot is what should we look for to be concerning in youth and that might need mental health? Like, what would be red flags for us?
So red flags, biggest thing we talk about is we're looking for change in behavior all the time. So what are you seeing change in their behavior? Are they isolating? Are they quieter? Even in their own appearance, are they not taking care of themselves? Are they disheveled in their looks? So we're always telling our providers and our school partners, look for those changes. This is obviously a little more challenging, seeing as we're living in a world where we're not able to depend on our school providers for that anymore. And we lean on them a lot. I think that school is a place where they see a lot of our kids, CPS calls nationwide have gone down, and that's not because we fixed abuse. It's because the schools were the people that saw that. They had their eyes on the kids and they were the ones reporting. And so that's a big concern in this as well. So if we can't see those changes in behavior, looking through it, most of our students are involved in an online distance learning. They're Zooming with teachers. So talking with teachers, school counselors, continue to watch for that behavior. Are they engaged? Have you lost contact with students? Are you losing track of them? One thing we really love about our partnerships with the school districts is the relationship school counselors and principals really have with their students. They know those schools like the back of their hands. So they can identify relationships that are broken, where there's bullying happening. And so we lean on that. If we even have concern about a current client through a school, we're calling the school counselor now, like, hey, can you help us? Can you find this parent? And they're always willing to kind of go above and beyond and know how to find that. So I think another thing that I'm unfamiliar if the Tacoma School District has the software, but I know that Puyallup and Peninsula School District have the software in the devices and computers that they hand out to the students, and it's called Securely. So the Securely is an amazing software. As mental health providers, Kathy and I are in love with this software.
Yep.
And so what it does is it picks up anytime a student searches for a word related to suicide. If it's how to die, ways to die, suicide, anything like that, and it immediately sends a ping to the administrative team, who then reaches out to the student or the family. And so, we try to partner with our school district personnel in that way too, that, hey, if you have a student you're concerned about based on these searches, reach out to us so we can help in seeing them and doing the risk assessment for where they're at if they're doing searches for such things.
Great. We've been asked, what can adults in a child's life do to best influence their well-being? I think, for sure anything we can do to reduce parental stress and increase their involvement with their kids would be great. I know a lot of my therapists initially, when schools were let out early, a lot of their Zoom calls with families was just how to provide that structure. They lost a lot and how to do that in a way that decreased stress. Increased just social connection, like Beth talked about. Kids lost their sports, lost the ways that they're connecting. We know they use social media, but honestly, I think social media can drive just disconnection as much as it can drive connection. And so I think we have to be aware of that. All the things that were not good about social media still exist and are probably amplified because they're not being balanced by other messages. I could do a whole thing on social media and how I feel about that. What do you think, Beth?
Definitely.
Well, yeah. What else can?
So other ways adults can kind of help influence that is providing trauma-informed care. So promoting a culture of safety, a place of trust, and empowerment, really letting them know that they can communicate with you if they're struggling. checking in on basic needs. So like Kathy mentioned in the beginning, sometimes that's just where we're at with some of them. So basic needs, are they being fed? Do they feel safe? Do they have the basic needs being met? Because until those are being met, it's really hard to go and do the work of the mental health need. And helping parents talk to their kids about what's happening around us, about this pandemic, about COVID, normalize the experience. We talk a lot with our clinicians about, that I guess the thing that we can use in this situation is that we're all in this together. We are all struggling, and we're all feeling this for the first time and unsure of what to do. And sometimes youth just need to hear that. They need to know that they're really not alone in that feeling of being afraid or feeling lonely or increase of sadness and depression. And then giving perspective, so on that note too, Kathy shared, a podcast that we all kind of went around our staff team that I highly recommend for anyone out there listening, by Brene Brown. Brene Brown is a phenomenal speaker about mental health, about vulnerability, about everything. And so she had a podcast that came out right as COVID-19 came. And the timing really couldn't have been perfect, because there's no better person to really walk you through it and make you feel some validation and again, normalizing about how we're all feeling. And that, I think, is really good even for the youth to hear. So yeah.
Okay. The podcast, the name of the podcast is FFTs. It's effing first times. If you're looking for it, and I do highly recommend it, is required reading. That's your homework, or not reading, listening. You should go listen to that.
Yes.
Some strategies and tactics to kind of think about for youth as we go through this. I think one is, let's prepare now for what's coming. If we can anticipate a spike in suicidality and depression and behavioral health, what can we do to build our community system to help meet that need? I know that one of the things that's being worked on right now is a partnership between Elevate Health and behavioral health agencies, Comprehensive being one of them, is to prop up a community support line, which really is a place for folks to call in and just get support and resource connection. We're hoping that will start pretty soon. Normalize feelings. It's really important to not start sentences with "at least." Those tend to not be empathic responses. At least, you aren't a senior this year. I mean, that it just doesn't validate the experience that's unique to somebody that they're having and what their loss is. We need to develop resiliency and coping skills, right? And that's giving people a sense of purpose, inspiring hope, helping people become more psychologically flexible and adaptable. And I think for kids, I think as adults, we tend to tell kids, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Right. And I think, it's like you want to provide reassurance, but also dipping into normalizing what might happen, right? I have a 19-year-old daughter, was evacuated from college in March, and didn't get to finish her freshman year. And I'm kind of exposing her to the fact that I don't know what's going to happen in the fall. You may not go to school. You may go to school. I want her to be flexible about it. I want her to start thinking flexible about it, so that whatever happens in September, she's going to go, oh yeah, that's the thing Mom talked about. Okay. I can manage it. That's the thing. And I think that's kind of, we have to encourage parents and help them have the words. I don't know, what you want to add to that, Beth?
Yeah, I think focusing too on increased social connections. That is just so important. That feeds not only our youth, but all of us. And so again, we all lost so much normalcy. Our youth lost that, whether it was lunchtime, sports events, all those things. So however we can increase those, big or small, trying to focus on that and supporting them through that. We all got really comfortable really fast with getting to know each other over Zoom, FaceTime, whatever your platform wants to be. But we also got used to how to use that to just stay connected. Sometimes it's just using it to see a funny filter and laugh with one another. Sometimes it's just, again, because we can't see one another face to face. So really focusing on increasing whatever you can with social connections. Regular contact and check-in. So it takes a village to do this job. It's going to take a really strong and big village to do it right now. So be checking in with them, don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Kathy does a great training on suicide here, and we all get really comfortable really fast with, don't be afraid to ask them, are you thinking about this? Are you feeling this way? Our youth want to be asked. They're more afraid to say it. So do those regular check-ins with them, and with each other, with families, with other parents. Again, this is hard for every role, and it's a trickle down in our families. Engage the parents, so help connect with services to get needs and reduce stressors. So are the families that you're working with, was there a loss of job? Are they struggling with food, getting food on the table? Are they struggling with paying bills? The amount of resources that have come forward in this it's actually kind of amazing. And it's kind of beautiful to see that in a moment like this, so many people rise to the occasion and come up to help one another. And I think in the beginning, Kathy and I were like, let's make a little resource page for our staff to use. And it became so big that I was like, I can't manage this anymore. And that was kind of a cool thing to be able to say. So check in with families and parents, see what they need. The resources are out there. And if you're looking to how to get to them, Google, call people, call CLR. We're willing to always just answer phone calls and help people find their way. And given that the next school year is going to look so different, and it's just a guess of what it will be, I live in that future bucket a lot, and I have to kind of bring myself back, or Kathy has to say, okay, let's just focus on June. But it's going to be different. So what can we do to prepare the kids now? How do we get them ready for that? I think it's, part of what Kathy talked about, talking to them, being real with them. Next year, probably it will be different. So let's be prepared for that. How do we give equal access to resources? We've seen limited access to tablets. We don't have every family available to afford Wi-Fi, or multiple children, multiple tablets. So there's a lot of that. We need to really find a way to how can we give equal access to all of our families in all economic statuses. And as a community, we should really begin to work together to look at these things. Summer will come and it will happen quickly, and it will be September, and we'll be in a whole other new world of how to navigate this, but in a new school year. So working together, communicating, partnering together, which, I think we all really like to do. It's what we want to do to see our youth succeed and to be healthy. And like Kathy talked about, we're going to see a bow wave of mental health needs the longer this goes on. So when the fall comes, it's going to be hard. There's going to be an increase, and it's better that we be ready and we be prepared as much as we can to help our youth and our families.
Great. Elvin, that's kind of what we have. We're happy to take questions from folks.
Absolutely. No, thank you both. Very deep and a lot of content. Love all the specific examples, phrases, and things of that nature that were shared. So thank you. Yes, I will hold some. I'm still inviting those listening to throw some questions if you have them. But I do, before we go into the panelist Q&A, I do want to throw it back to Matthew to kind of elaborate a little bit more about other ways that you support, or kind of some of your approaches, maybe specifically too with LGBTQ youth.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin. Kind of just adding to what Beth was saying, is just about being honest and saying, like, if you're struggling to acknowledge that and find that empathy where you see that things are tough, and share that you are also going through that, but in a way that helps build resiliency and is beneficial to the youth. So it's not necessarily like problem solving for them, but acknowledging what's happening. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that we offer that I wanted to throw out, that's not only to our youth, but to providers, is that we operate a 24-hour emergency line. And that emergency line is open to the providers if they're feeling stuck, if they want help to work through things, especially around specific LGBTQ issues. But we also talk with our youth. They're calling at a higher rate right now, talking about what they're feeling, what they're going through. And it's staff that are trained and that they know. So there's a built-in relationship as well. A lot of our programming in involves social emotional learning, where we help youth name the emotion and how to process through it. And so the other thing, when we're talking with youth, is we talk to them about, like, what do they need? What would be helpful? What do you want in our programming? And I think that could go a long way for the other folks that are on this webinar, is you don't have to solve it all. The youth have the answers. And that's, what we aim for is a youth adult partnership. So talk with youth about what they want, especially amid the new circumstances.
That's great, Matthew. Thank you for elaborating a little bit more. Okay, I do want to jump into some of the questions that we had. A lot of our participants pre-entered some questions that I have loaded here. So first question, many of our partners who are listening are thinking primarily of rapid response, and all three of you have talked about what you're doing now, right? And then Kathy and Beth, you talked a little bit about moving into the fall kind of thing. Thinking into the future, how are you each approaching like recovery efforts? So kind of knowing that we don't know what's going to happen moving into the fall through the summer, what are your thought patterns? How are you thinking about planning for that? And let's start with Matthew.
Yeah, the interesting thing is now I think a lot of our youth and staff have found somewhat of a rhythm in the middle of this crisis, and now we're about to go into a new reality. And so I think as quickly as we can, finding guidance about how youth are going to be able to access our services in person. What's our organizational plan, so that there's some level of reassurance and certainty that they can know what to expect and feel comfortable returning back to our offices in our buildings. And there's going to be new challenges about what they experience at schools. I know that in California, they started outlining a plan of how they're going to return, and it's bizarre, and it's going to be a new reality. So talking with them about what to expect at school, when can they talk to someone, how can they reach us? So I think continuing to offer the fellowship part and not underestimate the connection that the staff can have with the youth and the youth can have with each other, and being that conduit for youth to meet and talk with each other.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. Kathy or Beth, anything thinking about after the rapid response time period, thinking in the recovery?
Yeah, boy, this is, again, no frame of reference here. I think that at Comprehensive, we really are leaning back into our values and our vision, which is providing services with no barriers. And how can we get back to having no barriers? And to that end, we're slowly beginning to open up for clinic and reception time to be able to offer that to folks who would benefit from that and need it. The week of June 8th, we will open up much more broadly than we are now. Right now, it's just 3 days a week. But it looks very, very different at Comprehensive. We had to restructure our lobbies, our treatment rooms, have new protocols. And so it will feel different to our clients as well. But I think our focus is every move we make, does it support the community? Does it provide rapid access to us with low barriers? And what can we do? Is there money? It's like, I agree with Matthew. I feel like we shifted into one model of care, and then we rapidly are shifting now to another model of care. And it's just about the staff get into a rhythm, and it's like, here we go, we're going to shift again. And it's a huge undertaking because our employees are impacted by all of this as well. So as much as they're mental health providers and they're providing, they're also impacted personally by what's going on. And so it's quite a lift. I don't know if Beth wants to add on specifically about the youth programming.
I think just similar to what you said, I mean, it's going to be very different, and really just trying to get back to the youth who really haven't been able to navigate telehealth and that we know are out there struggling. We want to open our doors back to them and try to get them connected back to the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you both.
We actually, one of the ideas Beth and I were throwing around in preparing for this presentation was, maybe having a dedicated phone line for school personnel to give to kids or youth and families, and a way that isn't just, oh, here, call this number or go to this place, but is we could provide some more of a warm handoff, or where they give us contact and we reach out. I'd love for us to problem solve that with districts, to be creative, and like I said, just remove barriers to make sure the connection happens. So I don't have an answer yet, but I'm thinking now. My brain's going.
Sure. Kathy, that is top of mind, at least for a lot of our partners, is just the ability to connect. And we talk about the digital divide, how it was there already, and now it's even exacerbated even a little bit more. So I think you're right about the networks of how do we even reach people to make a warm handoff, right? Like, is the technology there? So I appreciate you calling that out. I'm gonna stick on kind of the technology part, and you teased it a little bit regarding social media. So that is oftentimes the main method of information, not just for youth, but I would argue, I don't have any data, right? But I'd argue for many of us, right? So how are you approaches to social media? And as that is a major factor, as we think, to mental health. And I'll pass it back to Matthew first to start us off.
Thank you. It's a challenge, because that is one of the main ways that we reach youth and to disseminate our information and engage them. And so on one hand, we have this need to connect with them so that we can have this one-way communication. A lot of our youth are communicating with us on social media about particular problems that they're facing versus calling or texting or emailing. I mean, emailing is ancient to them, and they don't have any interest in doing it or even have an email address. And so on one hand, we need it, but on the other hand, we are trying to talk with them about keeping health, sleep hygiene, about, trying the best they can to find a pattern where they can go to bed at a certain time, put their phone away, not have it be the last thing that they look at. Because now that they have no other apparent outlet, from their perspective, it's like that they're spending more time on social media in addition to spending more time online with programming. So it's understandable why that engagement on social media is increased, but it's a pretty toxic environment. I think, with TikTok, our youth are, getting something fun and engaging, but even as the pandemic has been happening, that's becoming even more of a toxic place where people are getting in arguments in the comment section, where that used to be like a Facebook, Twitter thing, and now it's like transitioning to TikTok. It's just social media has its purpose, and it's a way to connect, and it's not a great place to be sometimes, especially when you're having mental health issues.
Absolutely. How about Kathy and Beth?
Oh boy. I love this topic because, like I said, I do suicide training at Comp, and I dedicate a whole part of the training to talking about this. It is good and evil. There's a lot of good out there. The technology, if used and harnessed correctly, is a great thing. We're seeing that now with Zoom. If, the pandemic of 1918, they didn't have Zoom, right? People just got disconnected. But oh my gosh, there's so much evil, right? Like there's just, it's, the cyberbullying and just misinformation. My daughter routinely comes to me. I learned so much about social media from my daughter. She just comes to me with things she sees that are not true, and are not based in fact. And I know a lot of parents that we work with that have no idea what's going on in their child's device. And that's scary to me because kids are exposed to a lot of things. We give them a very powerful device with little instruction, It isn't lost on me that we provide sex education in schools, but we give them this thing and we give no instruction about it, and no monitoring. And I think it's creating a generation of kids who struggle with social connectedness and ability to have relationships. When kids say to me, including my own child, says to me, it's awkward to have a conversation face to face and she wants to text me even when she's in another room in the house, I think that's a problem. Like, I think no, this is awkward. The fact that we're texting, we need to connect. But I think that's a little bit what this generation, this technology generation has evolved into. And I think we probably have to get a handle on it a little bit. So yeah, I could go on and on, but I'm gonna stop.
Okay. Beth, any thoughts?
No, definitely. Kathy gets this one all the time. This is her passion. So everything she says, I'm with.
Yeah. I mean, you called it out. It's a tool, right? And tools can be used for whatever the user is going to use it for. I think, sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, to balance out a little bit of what we're saying too about social media is just that kids have always been looking for a way to ignore adults and get away from us. And so we have to balance the fact of they have never wanted to spend time with us and they always want to go do their own thing. So to not get too hard on ourselves as mentors, service providers, parents, that part of this is natural too. And we also have a lot to worry about. And like you said, we should be giving more instructions, Kathy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, let's jump to another question. So this is regarding unsheltered youth. So do you all have any insight into how unsheltered youth are being served currently, or in what ways they need our support? And Matthew, I'll keep it with you.
So one of the programs that we started right away was we purchased gift cards in bulk, and we provided a higher level of, or a higher amount to give to people experiencing homelessness so that they can, buy the food and the essential needs that they want. And then also, for the people that are sheltered, still provide assistance, but really focus on helping those youth so that they know that they're not forgotten and that we're still here for them.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you. How about Kathy or Beth?
Well, we operate the youth shelter. And, as I mentioned, we've been at double the capacity. It's been really a thing trying to serve everybody that needs the service, but not having the space. Unfortunately, this is a population that does not get the resource support of the community that it really needs to get. And so it's quite challenging. It's basic needs. We're trying to get food into them at the shelter. We've had a lot of donation, which has been really appreciated. We've extended shelter hours during the day, and just trying to keep the facility staffed and working with clients is hard. There's a lot of risk in this population. It's, there's nowhere for them to shelter in place except at the shelter, right? So they're definitely exposed to a lot of things. And so I just think it's been really challenging. The focus isn't even more on basic needs. Trying to provide mental health support or education or connect with employment. I mean, none of that really can happen. And so I feel like we're just stuck. Everybody's just stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Are there approaches or methods, so knowing that everybody is stuck, supporting each other and partner organizations? Any thoughts on how you're reaching out to peer organizations or those who are doing similar work to y'all? And maybe Kathy, if you could start off with that one.
Well, we reach out a lot to a lot of places. I think what we'd all agree about is this population of youth are very, very hard to engage. And they definitely don't want anything that says mental health around it, right? That is a stigma that they are not going to engage around, despite some of them really needing that kind of support. They've been traumatized. There's a lot going on for them. And so a lot of it really is about engaging them, and keeping them engaged and kind of pulling them in with us. But it's hard. There is not enough resource. There's not enough resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Matthew, any thoughts on supporting peer organizations and maybe some of the organizations you work closest with?
Yeah. Before I jump into that too, there's been a lot of focus on, grocery store workers and nurses and doctors about, being the heroes of this situation. But, I want to say thank you to Kathy and Beth too for operating a shelter amidst this crisis. You all are the unsung heroes. This is like an essential need. And I just want to say thank you,
Thanks.
very much.
Yeah,
it's hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's just as important the message that we're preaching to youth about staying connected. We also need to do that as service organizations to make sure that we are leveraging the support. If one organization is doing X, then what are we doing and how can we tie it together? And to remember that we don't have to experience this alone. We have a great staff team at Oasis, and I'm so thankful for the work that they're doing in this. And, they're still staying connected with other providers, especially around mental health, also with the ACT team, which is housed out of Reach to help youth experiencing homelessness navigate resources and services. So, don't forget to practice what we're preaching. Stay connected, talk about what's going on, what's hard for you, and access mental health for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
I'm going to kind of shift focus to teachers specifically. So I believe, at least CLR, you all engage directly with teachers a good amount. And Matthew, I'm sure either directly or indirectly. So how can, in your opinions, how can program providers support teachers heading into the fall with regard to mental health issues that have developed over the summer and potentially maybe moving into the fall? And let's start with Matthew.
Okay. LGBTQ youth are already at one of the higher risks of mental health crises. And so we need to be aware and look for those warning signs. And so talking with teachers about some of the most basic things about coming out, looking for what might be some of the struggles, paying attention to closely what's happening into their classrooms, for looking for increased bullying, because we know that when a bully is, struggling themselves, they're going to continue to push that onto someone else. And so to be acutely aware of what's going on, and I think helping spread the word, to not rely on other places to just get a flyer out, to get another email out, is like to encourage teachers to say if they know of a good resource, to pass that word along about what they have found useful, because that to hear from a peer is way more powerful than getting a letter from us or a phone call from us. And so I just encourage teachers, if you have found anything like CLR or Oasis or any other organization that's been helpful, to please pass that along, because I think the strengths are in numbers, and that your colleagues want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. Any thoughts on the teacher front from either Kathy or Beth?
I'm gonna let Beth take that one because she works most closely.
Yeah, I think definitely building off what Matthew said is just connection. So making sure that schools, guidance counselors, you're connected to a provider. A lot of our therapists who are school-based, they work really closely with the school counselors, and that's usually what helps, is just having that relationship, knowing they can call the main line, knowing they can call someone here just to get answers. You know, are they on the right track? Are they correct about what they're thinking? What do we do? And like Kathy said, you know, we want to serve without barriers, so we want to help in any way we can. So I think making sure you're starting the school year ready and prepared and having those relationships and those connections, because, you know, again, what Matthew's saying, what we're saying is we're here, like we're ready, we want to help, we're prepared for what we're going to see, and we want to try to do what we can together to be ready for that. I know in the Tacoma School District, specifically a couple years ago, some schools, and maybe all, I'm not really sure, but they did have some brief training in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a specific type of technique, and a lot of that, which is a great one to have right now when we're going to see an increase in depression and anxiety in the fall. So, you know, maybe revisiting that when you're prepping for fall to come, what to look for, what to be prepared for, what are the signs they're looking for, having conversations. So I think being ready in those ways.
That's great. Thank you, Beth. So we have a couple minutes before we do some updates, but I do want to pass you all the floor one more last time to close us out with any closing thoughts from each of you. And we'll go with Matthew, then Kathy, then Beth. If we can. So any closing thoughts for our audience?
Don't forget to thank the people that have been helping you all along. You know, your board members, your community members, your donors, your volunteers, because like Beth was saying, we're in this together, and we need to support the people that support us and to give that love back, because they need it too, and they need to hear that they're contributing a lot. You know, I just want to emphasize again about, you know, social emotional learning is that to help youth learn more than being sad or mad, that they're learning more words to describe their experience, because that can be a more powerful thing. To, you know, please help the LGBTQ youth have an environment where they can come out to you. Don't be afraid to give us a call, even if you don't really know what the question is, or if you're thinking, I don't know if this is worth calling about. If you're having that thought, it's worth calling about. So reach out to us. Listen to your youth, like please listen to what they're saying, and and ask them. So if they're having if they have ideas for programming or interaction, that be open to that. And as Kathy was saying, the questions now are about essential needs, and we're going to be digging our way out of that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. Kathy?
Well, I agree with everything Matthew said. That was great and perfect. I think looking broadly at a community level, I would say make sure that we don't lose resource to behavioral health. It's usually the first thing that gets cut funding wise, right? That and education, right? So you know, I think we need to advocate and make sure that as, you know, we're struggling economically, that we don't cut the supports that are needed in our communities.
Absolutely. You're here. I'll second that. Beth?
I think the last thing I would say, and we talked a lot about how to be prepared for our youth and our family, but really also not forgetting to take care of yourself. We focus on that a lot at CLR. Self-care is a mantra here for us. And so, you know, we're all in roles, and, you know, whoever's here listening, you're probably in a role where you're helping others, you're leading others, you're a mentor, whatever you may do. And so it's hard to help others if we haven't helped ourselves first. So make sure you're taking care of yourself too. You're talking to people, you're reaching out, because, you know, that's going to just make us better as we continue to help our youth and families.
Absolutely. Thank you to all three of you for your thoughts today. I have a couple updates, and then we'll close this out in a couple minutes here. But we're going to do a little screen share here, as many of you probably have heard, to supplement the work we've done via TacomaLearns.org. Let me see here. Foundation for Tacoma Students, Tacoma Public Schools, and local internet provider Rainier Connect have partnered to increase access to technology for Tacoma students. With TPS's support, we've begun to identify students who do not have the necessary internet bandwidth or devices to participate in this new online learning environment. We have already begun contacting families to get them connected. In fact, today we're distributing our second batch of devices, which is where I'm headed to right after this call. So thanks to a generous donation by Microsoft. So again, trying to address the digital divide and get devices in the hands of students. That being said, hundreds of students lack the necessary technology to log in to their online classrooms, connect with their mentors, basically do any and all that we've talked about today. And the demand has already surpassed our supply. So the foundation launched a fundraising campaign earlier this month, and this month is open to contributions as long as the need exists. We also know that reaching students who don't have access to technology are some of the hardest to reach, obviously, right? So if you know somebody, a participant, a mentor, student, family, anybody that you'd like to connect to this opportunity, you can have them learn more about this work by visiting our website, which is graduatetacoma.org, and navigating to the COVID-19 landing page. So that's kind of our tech access update. Next week, we'll be hosting our final Friday forum. It's been an interesting and fun project for us, but the theme will be Funding Relief Part 2. In the second part of the discussion, which we started last week, we're exploring financial relief from COVID-19 pandemic and the future of our economy. We are joined by two individuals leading the charge to ensuring the system of supports for our community stay intact. Hear directly from Mayor Victoria Woodards and Speaker Lori Jenkins on how we can be thinking and informing our actions both in advocacy efforts and in the work ahead. And you can register for Friday Forums again by visiting graduatetacoma.org and navigating the COVID-19 landing page. So with that, those are our updates for today. Again, I want to thank Kathy, Beth, Matthew. Thank you for joining us and for your time today. All the thoughts that you've shared obviously are real and experience-based. We know we're in the middle of this and moving forward, but as y'all said, we're all trying to address this in a similar fashion, and the information that you guys have provided have offered, I hope, a lot of value to our listeners. So thank you again. And those listening in, please stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of your afternoon.